Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kilayim, Perek Ches, Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Samach Ches. We left off on Daf Samach Ches, Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid Va'asunin Bahanoah, referring back to the Mishnah that was making the contrast between Kilei Zeroyim and Kilei HaKerem, that Kilei HaKerem is uniquely not only Asur B'Achila, but even Asur Bahanoah. Like as we mentioned, unlike Kilei Zeroyim, not only is it mutter b'hano, it's mutter b'achila. So the Gemara will begin by quoting a source, a scriptural source for the fact that kilei hakerem is asur b'hano. We're going to be using a pasuk that we have in Parshas Kiseitze, and to read now in the intro the pasuk where it says loisizra karmacha kaloyim pentigdash. That will be the key word. Hamaleya hazera asher tizra utfuas hakarem. Which the taich is that don't plant seeds in your vineyard and do not maintain kalayim. That's more or less what we learned at the end of last year. Because lest the seed that you sow and the yield of the vineyard will become tigdash. Now, tigdash could be translated as it will become out of bounds. I know that Chumash Rashi, Chitas, Rashi teaches over there in Kiseitze, tigdash is tista'ev, which means it will become defiled. And as we will see, that this expression implies an isur hana'ah. That will be the first topic. Now, the Gemara here will bring the machlokes tanoim on Daf Samaches between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonasan. We always quoted it in the name of the Rambam, that the Rambam is the one that holds that when are you going to be chayiv malchus for kilei hakerem only if you plant two different seeds and a grape seed. The source of the Rambam will be now in today's daf, Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonasan, whether kalayim biblically is prohibited only if you plant foreign seeds in the plural, like a wheat and a barley, which they themselves may not be planted. If you do that with a chartzon, then you're going to be violating the biblical isur of kilei hakerem. Or even if you're only planting one foreign seed in a vineyard, you're also violating the isur of kilei hakerem machlokes tanoim. Now, let me say like this: when you have a vineyard, in a vineyard, halachically, you may not plant. We already learned midai daisa. Kevin, if you can mute your phone, that would be helpful. Or machine, if you're not allowed to plant within daladamas, let's say the two seeds. Now, two seeds may only not be planted within 6 tfachim one of the other. Question is, what's going to happen if you have two seeds, you planted them in a vineyard, but the two seeds themselves are beyond 6 tfachim, but they are both within the dalad amis of the kerem? Will that be kilei hakerem? Or are you going to say, no, since the zeroyim are not themselves kilayim because they are beyond 6 tfachim, even though the kerem creates the din of dalad amis, but still you won't be violating kilei hakerem. Kilei hakerem would be if you plant two seeds within dalad amis from the kerem, even though it's more than 6 tfachim, but the two seeds have to be within 6 tfachim. That's going to be really a machlokes between the Mahara Fulda and the Gra. This is a very interesting machlokes. We learned Chevra on Daf Yud Ches, going back to the beginning, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that kilei zeroyim is only prohibited biblically if two conditions are met. Number one, like we mentioned, the two different seeds, two different species are planted within 6 tfachim one and the other. And then number two, I remember when we learned this, the Gabbai says, what? Yeah, that they have to be closed in by a fence, or at least, like we explained over there, if there is a standing crop. So if you have a middle of a wheat field, if you cut out an opening, and in there you plant two zeroyim, even though these two zeroyim are not surrounded by a fence, standing crop serves as a fence. But for you to be chayiv biblically for the isur of kilei zeroyim, it's not enough that you plant two seeds within setvachim. We learned the din that they have to be surrounded by a fence or by an existing crop. And now, based on that, we're going to be focusing today on a scenario whether the standing grain can serve both as a component of the prohibition. Let's say the standing grain is wheat, and you planted barley, and the barley is inside this fence. You have to have a fence. So could the standing grain be both the fence and the other zera? That will be a Gemara's topic, and we're going to bring up the shita of Rabbi Chanina that says the words that ein ha'oiser nasa mechitza lahatzil. Mechitza also serves, as we learned a lot, as a divider, meaning when you have a standing halachic 10 tvachim mechitza, I can plant on one side one zera, on the other side another zera. I can even plant vineyard on one side and on the other side a foreign seed, all the way up to either side of the fence. But Rabbi Chanina says if the fence itself is a zera, so if you have, let's say, standing grain, wheat, even if it's dried out, you cannot plant a kerem on one side of the standing grain and another foreign seed on the other, because the standing grain itself is a grain, is a problem. And we're going to see how this will tie in to this question whether the standing grain can serve both as a component of the prohibition of kalayim and as a fence that will cause that which is inside it to become prohibited. This is going to be a very lamdish daf samaches, all the way on the top. Okay, beginning with the isur of hana that's unique to kilei kerem. So in the bracket, the Gemara quotes, Mishnah says kalayim in the kerem is asur bana. Where do you know it from? What's the source? And we are quoting the pasuk in Parshas Kiseitze, like we mentioned, that we already focused on that. But then the pasuk continues, pen, lest, if you will do it, tigdash. Now, what does the word tigdash mean? I already mentioned the word tigdash. Rashi writes the words tistoev. It will become defiled. We can teach that the word tigdash means it will become out of bounds. Now, what does it mean? He teaches here, it will become forbidden. So what's the meaning of tigdash? I know that normally kedusha means removed. Removed can connote something amazing. It's removed from commoners because it's designated to God, or it's removed from the side of kedusha. It's removed because it became bound with klipa. Oh, so since v'nemer lahalon, and here we are quoting a pasuk in Parshas Ekev regarding avodah zarah, where the Torah says pen loisia. It says pentivakesh boy. I think pentivakesh means that if you'll bring idolatry in your home, you'll become ensnared by it. Now, we're not comparing tivakesh to tigdash. These are two completely different words. We are making exeda shava from pen. Here it says pen tigdash. There it says pen tivakesh. And we already know that when it comes to avodah zarah, the isra of avodah zarah is even bahana. So ma pen ha'amar lahalan and Parshas Ekev regarding idolatry, the prohibition is even an isra of hana. And how do we know that it's asur bahana? So Rashi Elyon all the way on top brings, because not only because it says by avodah zarah over there in Ekev v'hayisa cherem kamoyu, and the Gemara darshins in Bavli avodah zarah daf nun daled ma sha'ato mahava mimenu harehu kamoyu, that even anything associated with it, even the accessories of it, is like it, that it's asur b'hanon. So ma pen amala bosvano. So af pen shenemar kan is asur b'hano. So you have exeda shava pen to avodah zarah. That's how we know that the word tigdash, which is normally actually a good statement, it's holy, in our context, it means it's asur b'hano. Source number 2 says the Gemara v'istad b'olam Nemar Khan again. It says by Kilei Akedem, this pasuk in Parshas Kisei saying pen tigdash hamalei. The Nemar lahalon. And here we are going to a pasuk also in Parshas Kisei where the Torah is prohibiting a man and a woman that designated themselves to be harlots. So the Torah says both in the masculine and in the feminine, also using the word holy. Loisihia liya kadesh mibnei Yisrael and loisihia kadesha mibnei Yisrael. All right, liya kadesh mibnei Yisrael. Oh, here it's not pen, but it's kadesh. In other words, don't tell me that the word Kaddish means something good. You find in the Torah that the word Kaddish means the opposite of good. Now, here we're making a presumption. The presumption is that a person that's designated to be a male prostitute, which will be the type of Kaddish, and the same thing with a woman, that the person themselves become Asur Bahana. That's the presumption. their labor becomes asur bahana, their possessions become asur bahana. That means that we have to completely separate ourselves from them, from their body, from their stuff, from their work. Again, the word kedusha means to be separated here in the negative. So ma'am kadesh, that's the presumption. Shenemar lahalon, the man, the male or the woman is asur bahana. Afkan, you see, here it says tigdash by kilei akarem, it's asur bahana, and the Gemara challenges the premise. So the Gemara says the kadesh is a person who is designated liznus. Is that person, is that person's labor? Is that person's possessions asur bahana? It's not true. It's nishtemes. So you got a wrong hekesh from there. So Amar Rab Chuna, no. It's a good comparison. A person does not become asur bahana, but be asur bahana. The act of znus, that act is an act of hana, and when we are not allowed to engage in a sexually sinful act, you can say that act is prohibited. Be separated from it. Isur hana, be asur bahana. I think the beauty of that is that actually we find the word kedusha for something negative. And that's the best hekesh. And now the Gemara gives a final source, a third source today. That is the boy nishme'inam. And others bring the source that here, when it says in Kilei HaKerem, pentigdash hamaleya, pentigdash means asur b'hanoyah. Amar Rabbi Chanina, that the word pentigdash, instead of making it into two different words, lest it will become tigdash, no, it's one acronym. Put pen and tigdash together, and it creates pen tukad eish. Pen tukad eish. That if you will plan such a thing, you got to burn it. You got to burn it.
It's interesting that, Rabbi, that you're saying pen as less. In modern Hebrew,
less,
pen is...
Less, L-E-S-T, T for Torah. Look inside the Rash Arilio, the right column, the third from the top. Pen tukad bo'esh. Pen hu b'mokim lo yisaseh. Pen always means alav, don't. And the Torah says don't, because if you will, halav hazeh goyim sreifa ba'esh. What do you have to burn ba'esh? Both the maleya and the zera. I just want to clarify, guys, the word maleya in this pasuk, maleya means that that you already have the kedem. You already have grapes. What's the isur? The isur is that as it fills out, and we know the shears are 200s or more, now everything becomes asur. Make it very clear, because when you have a vineyard and you plant even two seeds, if you have to plant two foreign seeds or one foreign seed, if it's not going to fill out, even though you violated the law, you're not gonna. There's no isur hana. Okay, go on. Now, this is the ground zero of the machlokes Rabbi Yosha and Rabbi Yonasan. Says the Gemara. It's amazing that it's not a braisa. The Gemara is reminding us of what we have to remember. The following argument. Ksivit says we're going back to the same pasuk on Parshas Kiseitze. I know there's a pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. We quoted that in last year. But leisizra karmacha koloyim. These are the words of the opening verse in Parshas Kiseitze. So Malamed says the Gemara she'einoi chayev ad sheyizra shnei minim bekerem. Divrei Rabbi Yosha. Now, why are we saying that? We're saying like this, that loisizra in your kerem, a mixture, taiches Rabbi Yosha, the kalayim that you may not plant in the vineyard are two seeds that they themselves are kalayim. Not now that you planted one seed, you're creating a new kalayim. No, pasuk never said that. The Torah is telling you that which is kalayim. What's kalayim? Kilei zeroyim, two foreign seeds, which you may not plant aside of the vineyard. There is an additional prohibition. So it's not only is God telling you don't plant two seeds by themselves, don't plant two seeds in a vineyard. Which means that biblically, when are you going to be chayiv? When are you violating the law of God forbid? If there are three things here, there is a grapevine, and you have kalayim, and you have two foreign seeds. These are the words of Rabbi Yosh. Okay. However, Rabbi Yonasan Amar, no, that afilu min echad. Don't interpret, don't plant that which is kalayim by itself in a vineyard. No, don't plant one seed in a vineyard, because if you will do that, you're making now the mixture. In other words, the kalayim refers to the kerem's future status, not don't plant that which is already kalayim in addition in a vineyard. Now, people can right away ask, if I am not allowed to plant two foreign seeds, which I'm not allowed in the Holy Land, by themselves, why did Hashem even have to add, don't plant it in a vineyard? We're going to get to that in the Gemara. We're going to show why each one rejected the other. Rabbi Yoshia says 2, Rabbi Yonasan says 1. Now, al date de Rabbi Yonasan, we're going to go a little bit both sides, and then the rest of the daf will only be explaining Rabbi Yoshia, and tomorrow we'll begin with Rabbi Yonasan. But in the beginning, we're going to go back and forth. So says the Gemara, al date de Rabbi Yonasan, he explains, where did he get to his opinion? Because since Ksiv, now this Ksiv goes to Kedoshim. In Parshas Kedoshim, when the Torah says, Sotcha, Loisizra, Kilayim, in Parshas Kedoshim, it's not Kilei HaKerem at all. In your field, don't plant two foreign seeds. That's the source of the first few chapters of this Pedic. So that we know already, we know from that you can't plant two foreign seeds in any field. Now, let me ask you a question. It isn't a kedem a field? Yes, it is. If I can't plant two seeds out of a vineyard, actually, that's included in the same verse, because satcha can mean a kedem. No matter on your land, don't plant two different species together. So if we already have from the Parshas Kedoshim, satcha le'sisra kalayim, the lav of not planting two foreign seeds, also not in a vineyard. We already know that from there. So le'ezod davar nemar. So why did Hashem have to repeat in Parshas Kiseitze le'sizra karmacha koloyim? So that's Rabbi Yonasan. So the only answer is chavraya amrin. Chavraya means it's not just Rabbi Yonasan. So the group of Rabbi Yonasan hold. I'll tell you why. Here we're adding something new that we never knew before, and that is a chumrah. In Parshas Kedoshim, the prohibition is only planting two foreign seeds. Here, the Torah is saying even one seed. That afilu is going to be usher because it's in a vineyard. So fields have one status. A vineyard, there you can't even plant one seed. There's a lot more to say, people are thinking, because in another field that already has something else, you also may not plant even one seed. I already have a wheat field. I cannot plant one barley.
This was the same thing.
Very good, Danny. Okay, let's go weiter. Let's see if we can get back to this tomorrow. The Gemara is going to come back to him tomorrow. Now, I'll dot to the Rabbi Yoshia. 1 second. So he says like this. Again, he's beginning also with the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. From there we learn you can never plant two seeds together. So indeed, according to Rabbi Yoshia, why do you have to give another prohibition? He's asking himself, right? I can't plant two seeds anywhere. Why did Hashem have to say, in addition, you can't do it in a vineyard? So, first of all, we have this concept of two lavim. So the group together with Rabbi Yoshia say that is lahasroya. So here we have a big rule. The big rule is that if a person is violating a lav, sheyesh by ma'asim, for which theoretically you'll get malchus, not only do you have to have Adam to testify that that person violated, the person has to be forewarned prior to the violation. And the ikar is that this hasra has to be by quoting the source in the Torah. Can't say you can't do it. So la hasra that she'im hisru by mishum satcha loika, and if the warner who saw a person planting kilei zeroim in a vineyard told him, you're violating two things. Number one, he quotes the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. It says, Satcha le'sizra kaloyim. Satcha does not exclude a vineyard. And in addition, it says in Parshas Kiseitze, le'sizra karmacha kaloyim. So if he quotes karmacha, you'll be like, in other words, you're going to get two sets of malchus. Okay. Now, the problem that we have with Rabbi Yoshia on this, just like there's a problem with Rabbi Yonasan, as I explained, there's a problem here also. The problem over here is, why can't we say Pashat? We just began today's daf. Kilei zeroim is muter b'achila, vaday muter b'hano. Kilei akedem is also b'hano. Why did the Torah write another love? Torah wrote another love because the consequence is different. No one is saying this yet. Just putting out there, these are the big issues with both of these opinions. Okay. Now, says the Gemara.
At this point, according to Rabbi Yoshia, if you planted one foreign seed in a vineyard, would that just be regular kilei zroyim?
In other words, it definitely will not become asur b'hano. Yeah, it's asur midrabanan, not midoraisa, and therefore won't be asur b'hano. Very good. Now, here comes the third answer, and there's going to be, like I mentioned in the introduction, I think a very important machlokes between the Marafulda and the Gra. But he says like this: Amar Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, that the reason why the Torah, this is according to Rabbi Yoshia, the kasha Rabbi Yoshia is, if anyways you can't plant two seeds together, why do you have to add what's the chiddush by the kerem and Parshas Kiseitze? So he answers Litin Shir Ached or Acheres, which means that when the Torah says in Parshas Kedoshim, as we kept on mentioning, what does it mean? Kevan, don't plant two foreign seeds. It means within 6 tvachim. Come on, shisha tvachim. So if I take two foreign seeds and I plant them near each other, but you have 6 tvachim in between them, I didn't violate anything, not even midrabanan. It's outside the shear. But by the kerem, there's a new din of a kerem. What's the din of a kerem? That once you have a halachic kerem, the avoidam of the kerem, midoy raisa, we learned, is arba amas. So that will be the big difference. Now, there are two ways of applying Rabbi Bun Bar Chia's answer. The first way is, we're going to read the Marafulda. Vav tvachim l'shnei haminim. The hachi yushur shalahem kidam nim sei perek hamim mechiltin and the chavich is a kidam sei meteches vav tvachim will go from geder. He's already reminding us what I mentioned because we'll need this from at base. That midai raisa, you have to plant two seeds within 6 tvachim, and they have to be surrounded either by a natural fence or by a built fence. Ubein shnei haminim lechartzon. Ubein. Now, if you take these two seeds that have to be always within 6 tvachim, but if you plant them in a vineyard, even if they are beyond 6 tvachim of the vineyard, but if it's within the dalad amis, kidatran b'avodas hakedem dalad amis, then it's going to become prohibited. Now, the Marafulda adds a bomb. I didn't understand him. What he says, for me, is akasha. I'm reading the second to last line of the but then he says, "V'nafka mean that le'inyan kiddush." Kiddush means asur b'hano. We just explained. If it's le'inyan kiddush, the whole thing of Rabbi Yoshia is a non-issue. So, anyways, I'm going to leave my question on the side over here. So the Marafulda clearly says that what does it mean when Rabbi Bun is saying there's a new shear? Not that the two seeds are allowed to be beyond 6 tvachim. The two foreign seeds, Rabbi Yoshia, there always has to be two foreign seeds, always have to be within 6 tvachim. When you have the din and Parshas Kedoshim, that's all there is, 6 tvachim. Beyond 6 tvachim, you're good to go. Here, if you take these two seeds that are already kalayim, and you plant them within 4 amis of a kerem, that's Parshas Kiseitze. Now you have Kilei Akedem. It's a different shear. And what's going to happen? Now they'll all become Asur B'Hano. When I planted them within 6 tvachim of each other, they're anyways Asur. The planting is Asur. But once I did it, I can eat it. Now that you're planting it in a vineyard, even though it's not 6 tvachim, it's beyond 6 tvachim. It's within Daladamis. Now you made Kilei Akedem, and it becomes Asur B'Hano. Look inside the Biur Hagra, all the way, the second to last line on the left column. The Kandal Adamus, he says a big thing. He says, Perush, Afilu imhein betoich dalad amis loika, dahainu, imhein betoich, the last line in the Amid, imhein betoich dalad amis loika, Afilu hashnei haminim rechoikim zemizeh kama amis. He's saying something even more. He's saying it's not only that if the two zeroim, which according to the Marafulda always have to be within 6 tvachim, but they are within Daladamas of the Kedem, you have a problem. No. But what Rabbi Bun Bar Chia is saying, I'll tell you why the Torah gives a new pasuk. Because if there is no vineyard involved, you always are stuck with a share of 6 tvachim. Once there is a vineyard, now even these 2 minim, if the wheat is within 4 amos of the vineyard, and the barley is within 4 amos of the vineyard, and the wheat and the barley are within 4 amos of each other. I don't know if it has to be 4, maybe even more. Kama amos. As long as each one is inside 4 amos of the vineyard, now you have kilei zeroyim also. You don't only have kilei akerem, you'll be chayv malchus twice. The wheat and the barley are beyond 6 tvachim. No, because the vineyard is machaber them. Now, each one...
Just to be clear, you're saying they're within Daled Amos of each other, though, right?
I don't know. I was thinking right now, maybe he didn't write Daled Amos on purpose. Maybe the Gra is saying a bigger chitch. In other words, each one is within Daled Amos of the vineyard. What do I have? I have wheat and barley and a vineyard. Boom. Now, if someone gave warning of Satchel Sisra Kolaim, he'll get Malchus for that as well. Anyways, that's the Gra and the Maraful that clearly says otherwise. This is really great. Now, Daf Samach on the base. I understand exactly why the Maraful mentioned it, but let's mention it again. And we learned this, my friends, on Daf Yutches, on Daf Chai, and we learned it b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, that by Kilei Zeroyim, B'Doi Raisa, not only do we have the condition of them being within 6 Tvachim, there's another precondition for you to be violating the biblical violation, and that is that it has to be surrounded either by a fence that was built l'shem fence or even standing grain. But it has to be mukav gedin. If it's not, remember when we learned it, and if not mukav gedin, then you did not violate biblically the inyan of kilei zeroim. So now the Gemara is going to now we're going to focus on Rabbi Bun's explanation to justify Rabbi Yoshia, who says that even by Kilei Akedem, you have to have Kalayim. So why do you need to have a whole new pasuk? It's also anyways. So now comes the kasha. Ma nan kaimin. What are we dealing with? Two options. Option number one is, again, to have Kalayim, to have Kilei Zeroyim, to have Kalayim by Zeroyim, they have to be surrounded by a fence. So now, where is that fence vis-a-vis the vineyard? If the 2 foreign seeds have to be surrounded by a fence, and now you're adding, and those seeds are planted in a vineyard, so very simple. Is the fence also surrounding the vineyard, or is the fence between the vineyard and the 2 foreign seeds? And whichever scenario you have, we're going to have a kash. So if the scenario is in Bisha'asa Geden Mibafnim means that if the fence is separating the 2 seeds with the vineyard, so you have the Kalayim meeting the prerequisite, you have 2 seeds surrounded by a fence, but it's not going to be Kilei Akedem, because we already learned Mishnayisen that if you have a fence, even if you plant a foreign seed all the way to the fence, and the vineyard from the other side goes all the way to the fence, you have no problem. The fence is mafsik, batal akera. So that cannot be the case. So it must be that to meet the prerequisite that we learned on Daf Yud Ches, and again, Rabbi Yoshia, that it has to be Kilayim before it comes to the Kedem. It has to be independently Kilayim. The 2 foreign seas have to be surrounded with the wall. So it must be in Bish'asa Geden Li Bachutz. Geden Li Bachutz means that there is a fence that's encircling both the 2 seeds and the vineyard. Now we got a problem. Why do we have a problem? Because that's exactly the case of the Mechoil HaKedem. The Mechoil HaKedem means, if you remember, in the 4th chapter, I think it was the second din in the 4th chapter, is that when you have a vineyard and it's surrounded, Mechoil means a circle, by a fence, even though normally the shear of HaKedem is Daladamis, but between the Kedem and the wall, if you do not have Libesilal 12 amas, you can't plant in the middle 4 amas. Not that you can plant in the whole 12 amas. The 4 amas to the Kedem is usher. The 4 amas near the wall is usher. You can only plant in the 4 amas in the middle, but that's the case of Mechoil. That's the problem. Okay. So, well, like, what's the Metzias over here? What's the Metzias of Rabbi Yoshia? So answers the Gemara, Elo, ki nam kaimen. This is what we're dealing with. Just like we keep on mentioning that when we learned on Daf Yud Ches that midoy raisa, you have to have 2 seeds within 6 tvachim. Surrounded doesn't have to be a fence. Surrounded could be with standing grain. And that's the meaning of the word besada. Besada means that it's not just a field, it's a field that has standing crop in it. Shahoya sham sedei tevua. And what happened over here? And you cleared out 4 amas inside the standing grain. And now what needs to happen? You planted a new seed. The new seed, guys, halt up, that you planted in the middle and the standing grain are more than 6 tvachim apart because you made a clearing of 4 amas. But in a case where both what you planted right now and the standing grain is within dalid amas of a kerem, so what's happening over here? Now you got a problem. Now that's the Isser. In other words, the problem that we had is that if there is a fence separating, so there's no vineyard. If the fence is surrounding, then it's Machai like Adam. So the solution is that the fence is separating. There is a separation. The standing grain, but the standing grain will not have the status of a fence that's mafsik between foreign seed and a kerem. Because since the standing grain itself is part of the problem, the wheat that's standing and the barley that you planted in the middle of it, they themselves are now a problem because of kalayim. You can't say, ooh, I have a natural fence of wheat and it's separating between the barley and the vineyard. No, the wheat and the barley themselves create kalayim. Something that creates kalayim cannot be used to be mafsik between this and the kerem. Look inside the Marafulda, the second line under the Gemara. Now don't forget, we quoted the Marafulda, unlike the Gra, that will make a nafkamin exactly where did you plant the barley inside it. So let's say you have a wheat field and you made a bald spot. How big? 4 amas. In the length. And here's the key. Vizara, and you planted gam hachartzen bikarcha. You planted a grape seed inside. Everything is in it. Vizara beis minim ba'oidach l'soif mizrach. Make a whole megillah over here. So you have a fence, a standing grain fence, and in this daladamas opening, you planted on one side 2 seeds, according to the Marafulda, and on the other side you planted a grape seed. V'zera beis minim ba'oidach l'soif mizrach, v'chartzen ba'oidach l'soif ma'irif. Ubein haminim v'hachartzon, in between the 2 seeds that you planted in this clearing and the grape seed is a little bit less than daladamas chasem ma'at. Now that's the case. Here the din is daladamas. You don't have a din of a mechoil. You asked the question, why don't you have a din of a mechoil? It should be 12 amas. The din of mechoil is only when you have a physical built fence and not a fence of grain. Why not? The Gemara explains. Now we're going to go to the last few lines. I'll tell you why. Because it follows the rule that Rabbi Chanina said. What did Rabbi Chanina said? That ein ha'oiser nasa mechitza lahatza. Gewaldig. Now Rabbi Chanina's case is a little bit different. They were saying it's very simple, guys. You have a row of standing grain. That's his case. And this standing grain is dried out. You have a row. I want to plant on one side of this natural fence, charzan, grape, and I want to plant on the other side something else. So Rabbi Chanina says Don't come and tell me that since you have a mechitza, the mechitza is mafsik between a foreign seed and a kedem, because the standing grain itself is not allowed to be near the chatzah, cannot be near the grapeseed. So that's called ein ha'oised, something which is itself problematic cannot serve to be a mechitza. So therefore, it cannot serve to be a mechitza, but it creates a problem. That will do. Sabrin Meimar, that oised, yes, nasa mechitza leyaser. The only thing that Chanina does not allow is for this standing grain fence does not make a hefsek l'kula. But when we're looking to be machmer, what's the machmer? That for you to be violating kilei zerayim is only kalayim if it's surrounded by a fence. So therefore, the case will be you have a field of wheat, and you make a 4 amas opening in middle, and you plant it on one end of the 4 amas. You planted. That has to be according to the Gra. It doesn't even have to be this. But let's go to the Maraful. You planted 2 seeds at one edge. You planted kalayim. These 2 seeds, my friends, are within 6 tvachim of each other. They are surrounded by a wall. What's the wall? The standing grain. You told me that a standing grain is not called a mechitza? No, only like Rabbi Hanina. A standing wall of grain is not a mechitza to be matzah, but to make the chumrah, that now you have 2 kalayim surrounded, for that you can have a wheat. But since you don't have the din of there's no din of a mechoil here. Now, if within 4 amas you're planting a chatzah, now you got yourself a problem, because now you have kalayim, 2 minim, and a grapeseed, and there's nothing separating one from the other.
Now, you said that the wheat is dried up. Does that make a difference? It's already dead?
Even if the wheat is dried out, that was the chiddush of Rabbi Chanina. It cannot be used to be a mechitza, to be mafsik between what's planted on one side and on the other.
Even though it's dead?
Even if it's dried out. Let's read the last Marafulda, which is second to last. It's like 11 lines from the bottom. It's in the middle of the Mara under the Gemara. Where's Rabbi Chanina? Meaning, if the seeds of the grapes are mitzad echad, of this standing grain, to say why? Why not? Because the wheat itself creates a problem. Now let's look inside. When I said the dried out fence, I don't know who this Ha'aras Maharap, but you have the Ha'aras Maharap. Go up to the little base. Let's read a little bit of his Torah. Kigoin is giving an example. Even though it dried out. But that's only midarabanan. Why is it only midarabanan, Kevan? Because we learned in the Mishnah, right? Remember, gefen sheyafsha. Once it's not growing anymore, avol eina mikadeshes. So the chiddush is that even where the standing grain doesn't have the power to bring about an isur hana, but anytime there's an isur to plant, even only midarabanan, ubeshvil sho'ei seres eina matzelas milikadesh. That's what let's go back. Because of Rav Chanina's rule, and that's his statement, that ein ha'oised nasa mechitza lahatz.
So sheyavsha means that it's still connected to the ground, right?
Yeah. Yes. And the point is, Yakir, if it would not be connected to the ground, then it would not meet the criteria of a geder that's surrounding the 2 zerayim. Another detail, when the Maraf Fulda said before that you planted in the circle 2 zerayim. Why 2 zerayim? Why not 1? Because the wheat doesn't count as when it dried out already. In other words, we're trying to create an isur of pentigdash. So we're saying that according to Rabbi, we worked it out with Rabbi Yoshia. So first of all, if you can't plant 2 seeds together, then why do you have to have another Pashas Kiseitze? To give you 2 malchus, if the guy was masrik according both. But then Rabun says that's not enough. I'm giving you a metzias that if not for the vineyard, you wouldn't have a problem. The vineyard is creating the problem. You have 2 seeds, you planted them on one end, And now that's why he has to add. It's also bahana. And now you planted a charzon outside 6 tvachim. That's the chiddush. The chiddush of kerem is that it has another shear. Either 2 seeds have to be surrounded with a wall, and we have this issue of a machayil. No. In this case, the standing grain, dinoi that it's makif, it meets the makif to make a problem. It doesn't create the din of a machayil. Doesn't have a din of a proper gather. And it fits. And all of that worked out Rabbi Yoshia's opinion. And now, God willing, tomorrow we'll continue to explain Rabbi Yonason.
But all these is based on Maratain. All this fence dried up.
No.
Isn't it part of it?
Because we learn how to sign the Oraisa. In other words, how are they united? It's not enough for them to be within a certain proximity, but they have to be embraced. If they're not contained, then it doesn't look like a taro. How is it mixed? It's 5 tvachim. So what that it's 5 tvachim? It's apart. It's one here, one there. Yeah, you can say the words matasayin, biblical matasayin.
Rabbi, why do we need to do this wall business? Like, why can't we just say it's like you said in the beginning, that every client field technically has a wall around it. Let's say around the perimeter of it. And now you're dealing with what in middle somewhere where there's like that you have your vines, and then you put down the 2, what do you call it? So if it's within Daled Amos, it's a problem. And if it's within 6 tvachim, then it's, well, I'm just saying, meaning as opposed to it just being the 6 tvachim, why do we have to have this whole, it's a wall and it's made of the same material, but it's dried up and I'm not understanding why can't we just
because when the Gemara challenged Rabbi Yoshia, that since you understand the Isra of Kili Akedem only when they're 2 foreign seeds, it's anyways us, and why did the Torah have to write another pasuk? For some reason, no one is saying to add an Isra Hana. What the Chavraya said is that you can be Chayiv Malchus twice. And then Abun rejected that. He says it's not about being Chayiv Malchus twice. He says there's different Shiurim. By simple, right? By Kilei Zeroim, share of 6 tvachim. By Kilei Akedem, he got the share of Daled Amos. Let's go with Tamar Aful. The problem with that is that based on what we learned on Daf Yud Ches, that the only time you can have Kilei Zeroim, it's not enough that it's within Daled Amos. It has to be surrounded by a wall. So the Gemara's problem is once you have a Kedem and Zeroim and a wall, why did Rabbi Bun said Arba Amos? You don't have a din of Daled Amos. You have a din of a Mechoyel. You have a din of 12 Amos. All we're trying to do is to show you where you can have a Metzias, where on one hand you have the Geder to create the biblical Isur of Kilei Zeroim, but that Geder will not be enough for us to term that space as Mechoyel HaKedem. And therefore it has to be a Kedem of standing crop.
Right, but the Mechoyel only applies in that area next to the wall. If you're in a massive field that's walled in.
So if the wall is in between the Charzon and the 2 Zeroim, then you can plant it all the way up until the boundary. You don't even need 6 tvachim. Must be that the wall is around both. If it's around both of them, then that was the argument. Why did Rabbun say Daled Amos? It should be 12 amos. He explained because standing grain cannot is not a Mechoyel HaKedem, but it's enough. It's enough of a geder to bring the Isur of Kilei Zeroim. How do we know that? Medayik b'lashon Rabbi Chananya. Rabbi Chananya only said Ein ha'oiser nasa mechitza lahatzik. That implies that ha'oiser is a mechitza lahachma. When Rabbi Chananya had another case, but his words are very they imply a lot. His words apply is that they don't serve as a barrier lahatzel, but they are a barrier for what? For the Rabbi Yechanan's din on Daf Yud Ches.